Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. So glad to have you here on Life Support. What we do on this program is we tell stories and we talk about how God redeems. And sometimes the stories are hard. We talk about suffering and trauma, but God is in pursuit of you, and we want to remind you of that. I've got a really special guest with me. He's the president of Engage Your Destiny, Armin Assadi, and he was here not long ago. And Armin, it's good to see you again.
Likewise.
Thanks for coming back. We went so fast through your story, and just as a Reader's Digest version, you grew up in Iran, you fled, ended up here in the United States. You ended up, kind of drifting into a life of crime. You headed this huge kind of a crime organization. You made a ton of money, but you realized that Satan had kind of left you high and dry, and you had been chasing all the wrong things. And it got as bad as you really wanted to take your life, and you were angry with God that he wasn't going to do that for you. And now you made a comment last time. You talked a little bit about how you thought you were going to be sentenced and you ended up being a pastor. Now, some pastors would say that is the sentence, but not me, of course. But during COVID, it feels that way once in a while. So take me to the time when, you obviously were arrested, and kind of start there and kind of how did that whole thing begin to play out?
Well, the feds had no idea where I was, so they decided to go to my parents' house while they were hosting a bunch of other Persian family members, so that's always good. And my parents didn't know where I was, so they had my mom call me on my cell phone from the home phone, and then my mom said there's some lawyers here to see or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then the U.S. Marshals got on and they said, hey, we just need to talk to you. And I was like, all right, sounds good. Can you just tell me what you're arresting me for? And they're like, no, we just like to talk to you. That's all. And I said, fine. Had a friend drive me, went to my parents' house. There was no cars around, threw my hands up coming up just in case. And next thing I know, there's just squad cars, unmarked cars all around me, and that was kind of the beginning of the court trials.
Yeah. So how long did those trials last and so forth?
I would say between pre-trial to trial and sentencing, it probably took a little over a year. So it was pretty intense.
Did your mom at that point know that you were involved with all this stuff?
No, and the only reason I know that, because I think there was part of me that assumed she knew, like how could she not know? But I remember my brother telling me he had to explain it to them, and they still weren't getting it, and he had to, show them a movie and say he's one of those guys.
Wow.
For them to finally get it, and it still didn't click. Like, no way, not my sweet kid. It's like,
yeah,
I'm not sweet.
Yeah. Well, having the U.S. Marshals at the house, I would think, would be a little startling.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Was there a sense of relief when you were taken into custody after kind of living that lie for so long, or
no?
Really.
No, you just check out. You just follow the process.
And just kind of go into survival mode?
No, you just do what you're supposed to do.
I see.
You don't talk, but you talk enough. You always ask for attorney right away.
I see what you're saying. So you're following what you've kind of been trained, or the code of what you're supposed to do and not do.
Yeah.
I see. So your mind kicks into that gear. Like,
yeah.
okay, now I got to play my role here. What should I say, not say? What's next? All that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, even if I'm done with that life, I got to do this right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if they catch wind of me saying anything to anyone, it's not me that's at risk. Yeah. They're going to take out someone I love and make me live with it.
I see.
Like they're not merciful.
Yeah.
If they were merciful, they'd kill me, but these people aren't merciful.
Yeah, I remember when I was sitting in an interview room and my son had been through a shooting and had gotten killed, and they brought me in to talk to they had arrested the driver. And my job as the father was to try to convince him to cooperate. And so I looked at this guy, and he just stared right at me, didn't flex a muscle, and so I realized he wasn't going to. So I just gave him the gospel, because I figured I got an attentive audience here, and so I just told him that his life could change and God loves him and this kind of thing. But I remember walking out with the detective, and he was really apologetic, and he said, "You know what? You didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry you had to go through that." He was just obviously well trained. He knew he couldn't say a word, and then it was interesting. He was never arrested. So a couple of years later, I called back and just asked, the cold case officer, why didn't he get arrested? And he said, really, you're kind of wasting your time, because he's either in prison or dead by now. And, we don't know where he is, but you can pretty rest assured that something like that probably happened to him. Yeah. So I kind of ran head on into that coaching, and I'm sure that's what police officers and lawyers, they deal with that all the time, huh?
Yeah. I'm sorry you went through that.
Yeah, it's hard, but I learned a lot about God, and, thankfully the man that actually did the shooting was not that way. He was a younger kid who, was in tears and offered, he felt terrible for what had happened. And so, we were fortunate in that respect, where it was easier to exercise forgiveness with a guy who really felt it. And, we didn't have to deal with hardened gang members and things like that. I think that'd be really tough. So you end up getting arrested. Now you're facing sentencing and so forth. You get convicted. What happens now? How did this whole pastor thing come about? Because you're supposed to be going to jail, right?
I mean, I wasn't pastor. I was interning. But yeah, I mean, I was looking at 10 years minimum mandatory. I wasn't going to be cooperating, and so you just kind of look at it. Your best case scenario is you're going to be serving 10 years in prison, and you get out in 8 years for good time or whatever it is, right? And I don't know fully how to explain it in a short story, so I'll just say the outcome was they found me guilty, and then they didn't give me any prison time. So I am a felon. I just didn't serve prison time. Mm-hmm. I served jail time on weekends, which was interesting because the judge said, Armin, I want you to turn yourself in every Friday at 10 a.m. and check yourself out at 10 a.m. on Sundays. That should give you enough time to get to the second service at your church.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yep. And, and when I got out, I was sitting in a van rather than a prison cell. And I mean, that was a lot to try to figure out what happened. And I remember sitting in the back of this van, which doesn't sound, amazing, but it's not a prison cell.
Yep.
And that question, how did I get here? Kind of happened again. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, I get chills every time I think about it. Mm-hmm. I physically collapsed into my own legs, and I just started sobbing, and it was actually very rational, not irrational, because I had never felt that much love, because I didn't have time to process it. That was my first time process it, and it was just first time I could see how all my scattered life was actually somehow glued together, and it made sense, and God was just at the center of it, even though I didn't know him, and if I did, I rejected him. Mm-hmm. But here I am in the middle of grace, mm-hmm. and I have no right to it. Mm-hmm. They don't deserve it at all, anything they would have thrown at me would have been a fraction of what I deserved, even 10 years. That would have been a fraction.
But you didn't really, did you understand the source of that grace at that point?
Oh yeah, I was well into my, mm-hmm. I already gave my life to Christ kind of thing, mm-hmm. which was a whole...
Yeah, how did that happen? Tell me about that.
Well, I quit that life.
Yeah.
Eventually give my life to Jesus at my church, Substance, and then I got indicted, So at that point, I was like, oh, so this is what it means to follow Jesus, mm-hmm. It's like you give him your life, you give him your life.
Yeah,
You're
right,
going to prison.
right,
I was
right.
like, I
Yeah,
don't want to be a Paul story.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, I mean, and honestly, you have options, and the least favorable option is put your faith in God. And a lot of times we put our faith in a God to get a job or to whatever, first world problems. But putting your faith in God when you're looking at 10-year minimum mandatory sentence, that means it could be a life sentence.
Right.
So it was a big exercise of faith.
I bet it was.
Yeah.
That's scary.
And I had no idea what the outcome was going to be. And getting no prison time was definitely not one of the outcomes I predicted.
So you didn't see that coming? No.
No. I just thought maybe best case scenario I'd serve, get 5 years, maybe get out in 3, something like that.
So how did you get hooked up with the church?
I went to the most socially awkward men's group I've ever been to in my entire life, and they were just trustworthy guys, awkward, but trustworthy, and socially incapable, but like their intention was very easy to see. I'm just a body language guy, I don't care any words that come out of your mouth, but their body language was.
You could immediately tell a difference with those guys than what you were used to.
It was you just relax, They mean no harm. They pose no threat. They're not trying to use you. They have no idea who you are.
Right.
Right. So how could they use you?
Because you had kind of lived your life on edge, right? I mean, from the time you were just a child, you were running from authorities. Your family was fleeing. You had to, you really hadn't had an opportunity to experience that kind of. I'm safe now. I'm with people that love me now. That had to be an amazing experience to discover that.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if
even with socially awkward guys.
Yeah, and I don't know if I fully believed it,
Yeah.
But there wasn't enough red flags for me to dismiss it. So it got me very curious. I'll just put it that way.
Right.
And my curiosity led me down a path of meeting a certain family, seeing a certain church. You know the process. You're a pastor.
Yeah. Well, it's different for everybody. And it's pretty neat to hear the stories, though, because God calls people to himself in all kinds of crazy ways. So here you are now. You're a father. You got your own family, and you were teasing me before about how you're probably the most overprotective father in America or something. How does being a father I guess, help you understand God's love for you and as your father? And do you kind of discover more of that as you go along, loving your own children and that kind of thing?
I'll say this: I have experienced a lot in life. I've seen a lot in life. I've been all over the world. I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and so I thought I knew a lot about this world. And I'll say exactly what I said to my wife when we were walking down the street when we just had our firstborn, Ada. She couldn't have been more than a month old, and we had her in a stroller. We're just walking, and I stopped her, and I was like, Ash, I feel like this is the first time I see life in color. Like, I'm looking around, and it's things I've seen before, but they've never looked like this, and it was just,
wow.
It's still true now, it's just like until you have your own kid, like that you don't, there's no way to explain it to anyone, like I couldn't articulate it if my life depended on it. It was just, I have my kid in front of me, I have my wife next to me, and I'm looking around, and the world just looks brighter. Just everything was more meaningful, and it's so much easier to understand a father's love, God's love when you have your own kid, and when you realize what you're willing to do for this kid that can do nothing for you.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I think that it's sometimes it's hard to believe that God loves us as much as we love that child.
Yeah.
because the love for our children is kind of infinite, and it's hard to believe God could actually love us that way. But what a wonderful picture he's given us to try to understand that love and our love for our children.
Yeah. And God has done that, especially with my third born. She's 16 months old, going on 25 years. That child's a thug, you know. I mean, she's a little gangster. Like, she will slap you and think it's funny. And, like, she has a lot of my bad tendencies. And it's so funny because it's inappropriate and you want to get mad at her, you know, where like she's 16 months old, and then you start processing what's happening, and you start smiling, and you grab her and you hug her, because she knows what she did was completely wrong, you know, because she's giving you the
the look.
And it's you want to punish, you want to give them serious consequences, but it's like you just get filled with this love and this grace, and you just grab her and just, you know. And it's those moments. I have a lot of them with her, but I feel closer to God every time she becomes problematic. It's a weird statement to make, I know that, but that little girl's gangster, you know, and she's going to be very much like me. She's either going to be completely sold out for Christ, or she's going to be a criminal.
one or the other, no middle ground, right? But, you know, when you tell your story, it reminds me of the book of Colossians, where you know, it talks about how we've been redeemed from the kingdom of darkness and placed in the kingdom of, you know, the beloved Son. And I look at your life and I see like two distinct, you know, you talked about in color, you know, I see this dark life, you know, this kind of going nowhere, you know, darkness. And then all of a sudden here you are now on the other side, and you've got this family, and you're seeing things in color, and you sense God's love through your kids. And if there ever was this picture of redemption, I mean, that's it. And the bridge was sort of this whole court experience, and a judge that had mercy on you, and you were able to kind of walk across into this new life. And if without God's mercy, you could have just been stuck in a jail cell and never experienced the color part. You know what I mean? And I think for all of us, and for those that are struggling with things in their own life right now, and they're kind of waiting for that color portion of their life, or they've lost hope. I mean, your story provides a lot of hope.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know.
It does, because you know, and it's not so much like, for me, it's not even the kind of like, I was the worst person in the history of the world. You know, like I lived in a garbage can. I was a Hell's Angel. I murdered everybody. And now that's not even really what it's about. It's fulfilling the longings of your heart. And God was able to look in and see the real need, and the real need was family. And if I would have met you, I would have thought, well, you're just selfish. You're just out there trying to earn a bunch of money. You just want power, you know, all this stuff. But God could look in and go, oh, no, that's not what this is about at all.
Yeah.
It's about family. And so look what he's given you now, family.
Yeah, you know, I think you said it beautifully, but I think one of the things I've realized is a lot of times when you're the scumbag in search of something good, it's easy to dismiss God because you think, you go to God to change your behaviors, so that, and the only way he'll change your behaviors is if you believe a certain thing, and then if you believe a certain thing, then you kind of can belong. And it's when you take that audacious risk and say, let me just see what this is about, you realize his process is very different. It's first, he just wants you to know you belong here. You don't have to change the way you behave. I don't care if you change what you believe. I just want you to first and foremost know you belong here. And if you look at this generation, all these, you know, millennials, Gen Z, me being a millennial, it's like we're always looking for belonging, you know. And I promise, if you can make us feel like we belong somewhere, our beliefs will change, our behaviors will change, because we will adapt to the one thing we want to cling on to, which is the people that make us feel like we belong.
Yeah, relationships, so vitally important. Yeah, probably more important than ever, at least in my lifetime. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And you're helping a lot of people through Engage Your Destiny. Tell me about that.
Military ministry, our whole thing was, how do we go onto military bases and find these young soldiers, and before they go see the worst of it, how do we give them something to grab a hold of and have it as their hope? So our thing was just going and preaching and adding value before we started preaching, obviously, and we would lead them to Jesus, and then we would stay with them whatever they needed and resource them and all that. And now that COVID hit, we had to pivot, and now we're hosting the largest Vietnam veteran gathering in Daytona at Daytona International Speedway, because these guys and girls went out and they served their country, and most of them were drafted, and they went and saw the horrors of war, but they came home to this society spitting on them, throwing bags
shunned.
of blood,
Yep.
and being jumped and beat up like they were part of a gang, and they, people wouldn't sit around them, and we've never righted that wrong, and it's about time, and maybe we'll bankrupt our ministry doing it, but at least we went out doing something that we truly feel and know that is a vision from God.
I have a feeling God will supply what you need.
He's been shocking and awing us for a bit now, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's always laughable that you got a Iranian refugee born in the Islamic Republic of Iran who is the head of a Christian ministry for military and hosting a Vietnam veteran gathering. Like, the irony in that is so thick. I don't even know.
That's kind of like an only God statement, right?
Yeah, it's just how does that happen? No clue.
So how do I find out more about that?
HeroesHonorFestival.com if you want to find out about the Vietnam Veteran Gathering. If you want to partake, it'll be amazing. We got Toby Keith headlining. We'll have flyovers. We'll have the Patriot Parachute team skydiving in with the flags and all. I mean, it's going to be over the top, pomp and circumstance, just because that's how badly they were shamed. We're going to be just as audacious to honor them. So it'll be an experience of a lifetime for anyone that comes, and Vietnam veterans and their spouses, you guys are all free.
Wow, good for you. That's pretty admirable. And I really appreciate you telling me your story and being vulnerable about it. And I wish you all the very best, and keep running the race.
I will. Thank you for having me.